A second terror attack in the UK within a month, and in the middle of a general election campaign. On Saturday, 7 were killed when 3 men ran over pedestrians on London Bridge. They then got out of their van and started stabbing people. It's put the issue of security in this election front and center.
We believe we are experiencing a new trend in the threat we face. There is, to be frank, far too much tolerance of extremism in our country. But it is time to say enough is enough.
After what happened here on London Bridge just a few nights ago, Theresa May made her case for stronger security measures to stop the rise in attacks. But some worry her proposals could lead to more discrimination against Muslims. One includes criminalizing nonviolent extremism, a vague charge that not only raises questions about freedom of speech, but where the state will draw the line in surveilling its own citizens.
Also under consideration is a measure that would allow a terror suspect to be detained without charge. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn's approach to the problem has not been to crack down, but rather to reach out to youth in underserved communities, saying they are at the greatest risk of turning to criminal behavior. Nimco is a candidate for the Women's Equality Party. She came to Britain as a child refugee from Somalia. She doesn't think either major party is effectively addressing what she sees as the root causes of terrorism.
I live in London, where in the last 6 weeks 18 young people have died. You're not looking at the fact that when young boys are being radicalized, it's because they don't find anywhere in this world, in this country that speaks to them. And you should be doing more about that as opposed to just talking down and talking at us.
She says she's pushing back against a right-wing campaign of fear and manipulation that blames immigrants for everything from violence to loss of jobs.
So the Brexit campaign was very painful to watch. Everything that I stood for, everything that makes this country amazing was something that people were meant to fear. So my gender, my race, my ethnic background, my faith, and it's my role and it's my responsibility as a citizen to go out there and say, actually, I'm a young black former child refugee. I'm great, I love this country, and we can really get together in order to make things better for everybody else, rather than assuming me as though I'm taking something away from this country. I'm adding to it.
In the port town of Dover, there was a 2/3 majority to leave the EU. Among some, there's nostalgia for better times of old.
You know, let's put the great back into Britain, you know.
Neil Ricks, Dover's mayor, says he thinks Brexit is key to doing just that.
You know, there's a lot of concerns, obviously, about immigration. I'd like to see it heavily regulated, definitely, and watch who comes in and watch who goes out. You know, I mean, and if they go out, then what reasons have they gone out for? With issues what's happened over the weekend again, they're going to keep happening.
Take back your borders, a provocative message to voters used during the Brexit campaign. Now some in France are calling on Britain to do just that and to renegotiate a critical treaty which has kept tens of thousands of refugees and migrants on the French side of the border.
Newly elected French President Emmanuel Macron has said he wants to review the Le Touquet deal, which allows France and Britain to set up border controls on the other's sovereign territory.
You know, before when we had our own borders here and we controlled our own borders, we never had refugee camps then, so why should we have them now?
But the question for many here is what party and what leader will best get them out of the Union, which they see as the source of many of the country's problems. Randolph Nogle, the Newsmakers in Dover.
And I'm joined now by Robin Simcox from Washington, D.C. He is a terrorism and national security analyst at the Heritage Foundation. And from Zurich, Paul Knott. He is the author of The Accidental Diplomat and foreign editor at the New European newspaper. Thanks both so much for joining us. Let me just ask this question point blank. Given the increase in terrorist attacks over the past months, would you say the UK government has failed to protect its people? Let me start in Zurich.
I think there are questions to be asked. There are always questions to be asked after an awful period like the last few weeks in Britain with several deadly attacks, about whether the police, the security services have the right level of resources and have been given the right level of resources. So those are genuine questions that we need to look into.
And Robin, your take?
Yes, well, I think you'd have to say that over a longer period, the UK government hasn't done a terribly good job at controlling migration flows. Obviously, there is two components to this. You have the terrorist threat that comes from foreign nationals, but you also have British citizens that carry out these kind of attacks. And so the government has tried to make some headway, and this isn't just the Conservative government, but the Labour government before it, in trying to deport foreign national terror suspects, but it's not always had the legal ability to be able to do so. So there are constraints to what the government can do, and I think that has really hindered some of the counter-terrorism efforts over the past few years.
But Robin, then do you see the core of the problem being the presence of foreign nationals?
Well, it's a component of the problem. I think of especially in a period like the 1990s, where the UK took in lots of Islamist preachers fleeing authoritarian regimes, such as in Libya or Algeria or Egypt or Jordan, and they claimed refugee status in the UK, but they also went on to become some of the most high-profile leading Islamist preachers in the UK, who were very responsible for laying radical networks in the 1990s, kind of bringing the Islamist ideology into the mainstream within Muslim communities. And I do think that there has been clearly a problem with foreign clerics coming into the UK, foreign terror suspects, who the UK hasn't found it very easy to be able to deal with.
Well, I want to get your response to that. I mean, is it an issue of having allowed foreign nationals to come in, claim asylum, and then allow them to foment these extremist ideas and therefore act on them? Or is there a real just failure in security here?
No, I think no one would argue that any free society or any society actually has to be always vigilant about the people coming in, and nobody's saying it should be just open door and we shouldn't check people like that. But I'm very wary of tarring entire communities or all of the many people, immigrants or people of immigrant background, with the people responsible for these actions. And I think it's a dangerous road to take individual responsibility away from the truly nasty people who had committed these acts and incited these acts. So I think relating it to a very different issue of immigration is a dangerous road to go down, and not one that helps us to solve the problem. It needs to be about, as has been and continues to be, about identifying the people responsible and hitting them with the full force of the law.
Okay. Well, let me ask Robin, though, because some Britons do very much agree with you that immigration is the core problem here, and they voted along those lines. What do you think then the consequences will be now if France actually changes border agreements, as it is now said it will review, and more immigrants cross from camps like Calais from France into the UK?
Well, so I think that the UK immigration concerns don't all necessarily revolve around security. Immigration as an issue has polled as very consistently has been an area of concern for the UK, but that's not necessarily to do always with the national security imperatives. It's also partially to do with strain on social services, healthcare and schooling and housing and things like that. So in terms of the Calais situation, again, this is just one of those subjects that comes up quite perennially in the UK, and obviously there's a French component to this as well. I don't really know if this is going to get resolved. I see no special evidence that it will be resolved now any more than it was 10 years ago. And as for the idea of borders coming back up, I do feel as if there's a lot of obviously commitment to the European Union ideal, countries like France and Germany, but obviously we've seen cases in the last couple of years of terrorists being able to take advantage of the borderless parts of mainland Europe. So there are security imperatives there. How France responds to that is is going to be a matter for the French government. But it is worth stating that France has been under a state of emergency now for over 18 months, and it's no surprise it's beginning to look at every option.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, because Prime Minister Theresa May has said that criminalizing what she called nonviolent extremism should be part of fighting terrorism in the United Kingdom. First of all, what do you think that means exactly? And do you think it would be effective?
Yeah, I think you just have to be very careful about not affecting people who are not involved in any kind of violence. But we already have laws that are related to incitement to violence, for example. We already have anti-terrorist laws, and so we have actually the security forces have succeeded in foiling plots and locking up people responsible for them, and including people in planning or stirring up extremism and hatred and encouraging others to commit violence. So we would need to see what exactly she proposes. There's not a lot of detail there, I think, in what she's said already. But I think we should bear in mind the thing we're trying to defend here is a free society, and that encourages things like free speech. Up to a very high degree, and that we already have laws and systems in place to deal with much of this kind of thing. The issue is more making sure we catch people.
Okay, Robin, as we do, there are incitement laws on the books already. There are hate speech laws on the books already. Do you think they go far enough, though? I mean, why can't extremist speech, nonviolent extremist speech, equate to the outlawed hate speech that's no longer protected under freedom of speech?
Well, I don't think I don't think what we need here is more laws. The problem is that nonviolent extremism is I think is a problem in the UK, and I would give some examples. The sentiments that express, for example, on crime and on criminal offences, and nor should they be. But there is a broader problem, I think, with extremism. I would give an example from the Charlie Hebdo attacks back in January 2015. The polling in the UK after of British Muslim opinion on that was that a quarter had sympathy for the Charlie Hebdo attackers who carried out this massacre, essentially imposing blasphemy law. So is it a crime to believe that blasphemy law should be brought back in? No, certainly not, and nor should it become a crime. Is it a problem that, for example, that a quarter of people polled thought that? I think that is a problem. So I don't know if it's something you can fix. Well, it's not something you can fix with laws, but it's certainly a societal issue that we should be concerned by. Okay, and well, let me ask you this, including Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party, have pushed the idea that the better approach to address those that they see at risk of turning to criminal or extremist behavior is better integration policy. And they think really finding an extremist ideology only comes second to core criminal vulnerability, that you have to catch them earlier on before those extremist tendencies become a real problem. Do you think there's a solution in that there, or is it a bit too vague?
No, I think there's whether it's, I don't think it's a complete solution, but it's certainly something we should be doing. And to be fair to the government, they have been pursuing programs along that line to some extent. But I think, yeah, you see the pattern certainly with ISIS activists in Britain and Europe, where they remarkably often they're young men with sort of vaguely criminal or kind of backgrounds, have been involved in gang violence before, and then have actually come to Islamism, extremist Islamism, quite late in the day. It's not not that they've been a regular part of sort of mainstream Islamist Islamic organisations, anything like that. So there's definitely, definitely it's possibly the ultimate example of where prevention would be the very best thing of all if it can be achieved, and it is a long-term process of of community organisations, of trying, you know, of picking out people who are at risk and taking steps to guide them away from getting involved with such organisations and activities.
Okay, very quick final words, Robin.
Well, yes, I just think that I hope that as the government begins to respond to this, there's always a temptation for the government to reach out to what it thinks it's the most representative Muslim groups. Often they tend to be just the most organised rather than the most representative. And I wouldn't, for example, as someone who's raised as a broadly Christian background, wouldn't expect the government to engage with me purely through the local vicar. So I think there's always a temptation for the government to address these issues on religious terms. And to do so is, I think, probably not the path we want to go down.
Okay, Robin, I'll let you have the last word. I'd like to thank you both, Robin and Noel, so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.